What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a video regarding my authenticated bootlegs for the Star Wars toys. And I say authenticated instead of graded because while the vast majority of the bootlegs in my collection are graded, it's really about authentication and making sure that they are the actual bootlegs from the time period that they were supposed to have been manufactured versus modern customs, modern reproductions that are meant to look like vintage bootlegs. So I'm not trying to say anything about modern customs. If you want to collect those, go right ahead. But I tend to collect bootlegs that were produced during the time period from the 1980s and into the 1990s, early 2000s, even for some of these, like some of these Russian figures that I'm going to show you in a second. But I don't collect the modern stuff. The modern stuff are kind of, made in people's garages and things like that. And it's okay if you like those. I just don't particularly collect those. So I'm going to dig into just a small handful of the bootlegs in my collection. I counted them up one day here a few days ago because I was bored. I have 162 authenticated bootlegs in my collection, and that's a little frightening to me. So I can't go through all of them, but I picked out a smattering from different countries that I think people will like to see, especially those who are new to the channel. This was a subscriber request. A Patreon supporter requested that we take a look at some of my bootlegs in my collection. So I picked out some of the rare ones, some of the ones that have good backstories, things like that. And it's kind of going to be a very free-flowing video. So I'm just preparing you for that ahead of time. And I divided them up by country. So let's go ahead and dig right into a few of them. And what you see in front of you are the bootlegs made in Russia in the 1990s and into the 2000s by a company called Oritet. And I have a full video on the Oritet company and a little bit more detail on the history of the company. You can go back and look it up on my channel. If you type in Action Figure Grader Oritet Russian bootlegs, I'm sure it would pop up very quickly. And I'm not saying all the information is correct in those videos, but I do try to kind of provide information where I think it's appropriate, and hopefully you'll find the information helpful. But so here are four of the Russian bootlegs in my collection. The Oritet company started out manufacturing this one. This is an AT-AT driver cast completely in silver. And what's unique about this one is that it's complete. It's 100% complete with the weapon. It's kind of a ray gun weapon that it comes with. And there's less than probably 20 or 25 of these that are actually still complete that are known. And this is one of them. I bought this on Facebook from a Russian gentleman, and it was a little bit of a strange transaction, but we got it done, and I wasn't sure if it was actually going to arrive or not, but it did arrive safe and sound, and it did grade 90 plus. Now, CAS labeled this as 2003, and that is the date stamp on the backs of the Power of the Force 2 card backs for the Oritet figures. And they made a number of different characters. This was not made in 2003, though. There was like an excise government stamp on the backs of those cards. This was made much earlier. This was really made in kind of in the 1990s. And AFA labels it the same way. They label it 2003. But I can assure you that these were not made in 2000s. They were made in the early 1990s. I believe the earliest known example was kind of like 1991-ish. And there are different color variations. This is the most common version for this Russian bootleg AT-AT driver, but it is labeled as 2003 on here, and that's what AFA also labels it. But that, in my opinion, that's an incorrect information. Now, the rest of these are Bosks. These are Power of the Force 2 molds, and the Oritet company used that Power of the Force 2 mold to create a Bosk character for sale. And these two that I have here are very rare. The metallic green one is believed to be kind of an early test shot when they were still trying out different colors. It's a very bright metallic green. This one is labeled 90. I picked this up when I had insomnia one night, and a seller in Russia listed it at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I paid about $150 for it. This is one of only 4 or 5 known for the metallic green version of the Bosk bootleg. And there is one mint on card for this one as well as for the metallic orange. And those two mint on cards are the only known examples that exist today. They are owned by a gentleman named Dylan, and he has an incredible bootleg collection. He got his authenticated by AFA. And to my knowledge, those are the only two mint on card examples. But in terms of just the figure, this is one of probably, I'd say 4 or 5 known. And this one's graded 90, as I said. Now, this one I bought from a Russian gentleman on Facebook, and I paid a lot more money for this one than I did for this one. This is one of maybe 2 or 3 known. And this one graded 90 as well. And my guess is that these came out in the late 1990s. And as the Oritet company was kind of perfecting the mold and trying to decide what color they wanted to use for larger production runs. And that's why so few of these still exist. The one that you guys probably have seen before on eBay and elsewhere is the pink, the hot pink version. So this is the most common one. You can get this readily for 25 bucks or so on eBay. Gonzalo's Warehouse. Gonzalo is a friend of mine, and he bought all of these when they were a big, huge lot of these when the Oritet company was going out of business after the owner's passing in about 2006. So he has these for sale, ungraded on eBay. You can pick them up really easily. This one also graded 90. So I picked this one up from Gonzalo. Gonzalo's Warehouse on eBay is where to pick those up. The last one I wanted to pull out as it relates to my Russians is my custom display with the Power of the Force 2 mold of Chewbacca. So again, these were made by the Russian Oritet factory, and they did a number of different color variations. This is by no means complete. There's also a very matte brown finish that's unpainted that is assembled, and this is a factory sprue unassembled with the figure's limbs and torso, as well as the bowcaster that's in 2 separate pieces. All of that is on a factory unassembled overstock sprue. And then I also had it displayed by Collector Archive Services with 3 different color variations, with the brown, the magenta, and then the gold version of Chewbacca. The gold version of Chewbacca came with the same color bowcaster as the magenta, so that's why it's exactly the same. There was no gold bowcaster to match the figure. And as I said, there is also an unpainted, that's a much kind of more matte finish to the brown that you can pick up as well. But that's kind of a cool custom piece, and that one is graded 85 and authenticated, and this one's from the 2000s as well. Now let's dig into a few Mexican bootlegs. Here are a few Mexican bootlegs in my collection, and the Mexican bootlegs for Star Wars are easily the most dangerous to collect because there are a lot of modern customs out there on eBay. If you type in Mexican bootleg Star Wars, hundreds and hundreds of different listings will pop up on eBay, but the vast, vast majority of them are just modern customs made within the last 6 months. So you have to be careful. The other thing about Mexican bootlegs is that the 1980s and the 1990s molds for a number of the figures are very difficult to tell apart. And I certainly am not an expert on them. It's very hard to tell. And, I personally have no idea sometimes whether it's a 1980s or a 1990s unless it's a different type of plastic used. Most of the 1980s bootlegs have like a more translucent plastic. And I would say that, and they were much more crude, I would say that both of these Bib Fortunas, for example, are probably 1990s. They are labeled as 1980s, and they very well could be. They could be late 1980s, but there is another Mexican bootleg Bib Fortuna that is cast in a much more translucent plastic, and he also came with a metallic staff, just like the Kenner version, except it's made out of metal. Azio's Bootlegs and Lily Letty on Facebook, he is the expert on Mexican bootlegs, so I would steer you to Azio. Horatio is his real name. He could tell you really quickly, just looking at some of these, whether they're 1980s or 1990s, but I would say he'd probably agree with me that both of these Bib Fortunas are 1990s, early 1990s probably. But they're both very cool figures. This one is an unpainted blue that I picked up from Jose Del Toro, who's a very well-known collector. And then this one I picked up from a gentleman, I believe, named Brandon Ye, who is a great collector and a good friend. And this one actually included the cape and is painted like with a silver accents. Most of these Bib Fortunas were painted with silver. And I also have a darker blue example with gray paint instead of silver. But this cape is actually an authentic cape. It's kind of made with almost like a trash bag material. It's very thin, very papery, just like the Princess Leia Polish bootlegs that, it comes with those. But pretty cool to have a couple of those. Now, this squid head, on the other hand, is 100% a 1980s bootleg. And this was a gift from a subscriber of mine named Carlos, who has an incredible collection of Lily Lettys as well as Mexican bootlegs. And he sent this to me as a channel gift. And one of the more generous gifts I've ever received. I've certainly received a number of amazing gifts from Keith Guppy and James Marland and Boss Bounty, and just a number of folks have been so generous to me over the years. But this is one that he sent me, and this is complete. It includes the bootleg blaster as well as the bootleg belt. And this squid head is kind of like a translucent white, and there is other kinds of colors and other kinds of colors to the cape. Here's a look at the back of the cape there. And according to Carlos, these were given away as party prizes in the 1980s to children at birthday parties, and they came in little baggies with a little cardboard insert that kind of held it in place. And he sent this to me very kindly, and I had it authenticated by CAS. But one of the absolute gems from my Mexican bootleg collection, and I've got others. I've certainly got some verified 1980 static bootlegs as well as some early 1990s semi-articulateds. But I just wanted to pull out these just because of the colors and the story behind this one, especially that Carlos sent me. It's just unbelievable items, and I'm really appreciative of the toy community and some of the amazing gifts I've gotten over the years. Let's dig in now to the 3 Turkish Uzay bootlegs in my collection. A company called SB Products made some really high quality bootlegs that very closely mimicked the licensed figures. And they were located in Turkey, and they were produced in about 1987, 1988. They came on really wacky card backs with lots of weird card art that was very clearly homemade kind of poses with like popcorn or calculators, things like that. The Imperial Gunner came on an interesting card back that shows him supposed to be kind of controlling the Death Star, but it was really just a large Casio calculator or Texas Instruments calculator. I don't know which one. But I've got these 2 Turkish bootlegs. They are incomplete. They do not have the weapons, and that's the only reason I was able to kind of pick them up, because they're way more expensive. The weapons alone are probably double the value of the figures. But I've got a Chewbacca, and as you can see, the Chewbacca looks very close to the licensed Kenner figure. This one's graded 85 and is labeled as no weapon, but very cool to see that one. And then this is the Imperial Gunner, as I mentioned. It's also an 85 with no weapon, but just really high quality stuff. They were sonically welded, very nice cast to the molds, as you can see, and just some of the more incredible figures. Mint on card. Many of these can command in the high, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. I mean, just crazy money for these mint on card if they've been authenticated and protected. The blisters were glued on, so they fall off really easily and they shatter very easily. So usually when you see an authenticated one by AFA or CAS, they have blister support because those blisters can fall off of the card very, very easily. This is the most interesting one in terms of backstory. I was on the website Etsy, etsy.com, ETSY, and that's really like for crafts and homemade stuff, But I found a seller that had this one for sale, and I was like, what on earth? And it was already graded by CAS, and I was like, what on earth? I cannot believe I found an authenticated, overstock, unassembled, unpainted, non-sonic welded AT-AT driver bootleg. This is a Turkish bootleg that is after they've gone out of business. They had a bunch of overstock parts, and so as you can see, the arms and legs are still attached to the factory SB Products sprue. The torso is unpainted and non-sonic welded. Here's a view of the back, as you can see. So I bought it, and I paid a lot of money for it at the time, which I thought was a lot of money. I paid about $500. It's probably worth now, I would guess, 5 times that number, based on some sales I saw on Hakes over the years. One sold on Hakes for, I believe, $2,700. That's exactly like this. This is graded 85 by Collector Archive Services, overstock arms and legs on sprue, non-sonic welded torso. So this is just a crazy story that you never know where you're going to find really rare items. And to find it on Etsy for the price I did was insane. And it came and arrived, and the case had some kind of wiggling going on. One of the dowels that was holding the the torso piece in place had fallen off. So I sent it back into CAS and I requested that they instead encase it like this so you can see both halves of the torso and actually see the interior of the torso piece, because I wanted to show off just how high quality these bootlegs were that were made in Turkey. They're truly very similar to what was produced by the Kenner figures, and probably the most closely approximating of the Kenner figures out there. And they're just not available in big numbers anymore. There's not a lot of survivors for these, so they do command big money on the secondary market. Finally, let's show you guys a few bootlegs from Poland. So here are a few examples of the Polish bootlegs, and they're pretty popular with collectors because you can pick them up for pretty reasonable prices, and they're pretty easy to authenticate, especially with the amazing guides, volumes 1 and 2, written by Jacob Brzezinski. They are basically the Bible on these Polish bootlegs. And there were a number of different generations. There were static, which I didn't pull out any of my unarticulated examples, but I pulled off 3 articulated examples that I thought were worth taking a look at. I also fairly recently made a video on just my Polish bootleg Boba Fett's, so you can look that up on the channel if you wish. I just went through about 7 or 8 different Polish bootleg Boba Fett's that I have in my collection. But here are 3 that I thought were worth talking about. This one is a Polish Deluxe Yoda, and he's got some crazy eyes going on here. This is a fully articulated example. The Deluxe series is a very small series. There was a Reese, a Gamorrean Guard, the Yoda, an AT-AT driver. I believe that was all of them. I can't remember, but they are easily the most expensive for the Polish bootlegs. There's just not a lot of survivors. This one is incomplete. It's only the figure, but he did also come with a snake and a cane. I can't remember if he came with a utility belt. I apologize, but I know that my friend Dustin B has a number of examples of these. And but anyway, he helped me acquire this one in a large Facebook purchase that he and another gentleman named Robert W made. And the two of them helped me acquire this one. And this one came back with a 90 score, which is just an incredible score. So 1980s Polish Star Wars Deluxe Yoda. And this is the dark green body with the red limbs. There's also kind of a bluish color that is much more desirable and much more difficult to find. There's also a light green version of this Yoda. So a number of different colors out there, but this is probably one of my favorite Polish bootlegs, just because I never thought I'd actually own one. And there's not many of these that have survived. There's, I would guess, less than 70 or so. I'm sure that Jacob's book has an updated number. I just don't remember after reading about it, but I know that he tries to keep track of the number of these out there. And again, this one is incomplete, but a really cool figure, and I just thought I'd show this again since I've got a number of new subscribers that maybe have not seen some of these, but really wild eyes to it. But as you can see, this one did use the mold from the vintage Kenner figure, because it actually does show the date stamp on there. So this was the no COO version that they used for manufacturing this bootleg, but a very close approximation. This blue one is another interesting story. I picked this one up a number of years ago, and this is a 3rd generation Neon. And so these were made in kind of the 1990s. They were fully articulated. But this color palette is very difficult to find, and Patreon supporter Paul W had been looking for one forever, and he tried to get mine, and I was like, no, it's not for sale, not for sale. But luckily he was able to find one here recently with this same color scheme, but this really bright blue with silver gloves and silver boots and the orange vest is just one of the more unique color combinations. This one graded 85 plus, but this is a 3rd generation. The 1st generation ones came out kind of in the 1980s. There was a 2nd generation that came out in kind of 1991 time frame, and then the 3rd generation came out in the 1994-1995 time frame. And the fun thing about Polish bootlegs is that you can collect so many different colors for the same character. I think I've got 8 or 9 different Luke Skywalker X-Wings. You can see up here another couple of bootleg Lukes I've got. So it's just got infinite collectability, and I really enjoy it. But I haven't bought any here recently just because of space, but they are quite a bit of fun. And this is the other one I haven't shown on the channel in a while, but this is an overstock actual 2nd generation card back with a Biker Scout and with the weapon. So they did make weapons for these figures, and this is a Biker Scout weapon along with a figure. And this card back is really cool. And, you know, my guess is that this might be a third generation Biker Scout. So in terms of era, it doesn't quite match up because these card backs were for the second generation figures from the early 1990s. Whereas I think this is a third generation figure from 1995. But because this card back has the Biker Scout on it, I just thought it would be a great combination to show the third generation figure with the matching kind of artwork, and it just turned out great. But these are the card backs that were survived the closings of the factory, and it's a blank card back, but pretty incredible to get one of these actual card backs for the bootlegs that were for sale in Poland. And obviously during the Cold War from the 1980s and into maybe even the 1990s, the Polish bootlegs were basically a result of not having access to the Kenner figures. And whether it's poverty that caused bootlegs like in Mexico, or because of politics with things like these Polish bootlegs, there's just a number of different great pieces of collecting history that are out there. And it's not for everybody. I admit that. You know, bootlegs, some people just think that they're ugly and they don't like them and they don't get why people collect them. But there is a really nice, strong community for bootlegs on Facebook. You know, they're always willing to help. They teach idiots like me kind of the ropes, and I kind of learned on the fly, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but they're just a lot of fun to collect. And I just wanted to pull out a few examples to show you guys across the Polish, the Russian, and the Turkish bootlegs. There's obviously some in Hungary, such as up here, my Hungarian bootleg Luke Farmboy. That's the only Hungarian that I have as of right now, but you can collect across all kinds of different countries and time frames, and it's just another little slice of the collecting hobby that people can get into if you get bored with the licensed figures. I've kind of swung back the other way now after about 2 or 3 years of basically focusing 90% of my time on bootlegs. I've kind of swung back towards vintage Kenner stuff, but I'm sure I'll get bored again and want to swing back towards bootlegs. And it's, you know, it's kind of a nice way to do a change of pace every now and again. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed looking at these figures, and I hope that my Patreon supporter that wanted to take a closer look at some of these enjoyed the video. Thanks again, and I'll be back soon.